Good morning. Happy Friday to you. Welcome to ScreenJunkies Universe. It's going to be a good day today because actually it's Thursday and we're pre-taping it, so I'm asleep. That's Dan Merle.
I hope I'm not asleep, but I'm probably not out of bed. I'm
At
probably,
11?
And probably playing games or, reading something.
Oh, well, I'm definitely asleep. I'm very depressed. Spencer Gilbert is here.
You broke the illusion, Roth. They're supposed to think that this is current news, current events.
Hot off the presses.
I got that Friday feeling.
I think a like top 5 list is never hot off the presses, but Miss Danielle Radford is with us today.
Hello.
Hello. I'm so happy to have you guys here. So let's talk about this. Mission Impossible Fallout is opening this weekend, so we got to talking. What's your favorite action scene? I mean, no one else is talking about that. Where else are you going to get this kind of analysis? Right here on ScreenJunkies.
Are you tanking your own show, Roth?
I'm doing what we do best, frankly. But you're not going to hear it the way that we're going to do it, which is the way that Spencer Gilbert is going to do it right now.
What?
What's your favorite Mission Impossible action sequence?
I'll tell you what my favorite is. It's the first one with the wire and Jean Reno going toast, toast, toast. Or is it Tom Cruise that says that to test the thing? That is by far my favorite. I think that is set up so well with the kind of heist video of like, oh, this is an impossible mission for the following ways, because you have the thumbprint and the face thing and the secretary and the floor and the ceiling and the thing and the lasers.
Yeah.
And then so you know what he's up against. It's not just like he just happened to jump out of something, split second. Like, you're anticipating it, so then you know the stakes of when everything's going wrong.
Yeah.
And like, it started off the trend of him hanging from things, but I think that the most suspenseful moment in the entire franchise for me is when that little drop of sweat is coming down his like cool guy glasses, and he does the move of like, that's it. That's all it takes. And
that is an incredibly well-reasoned, descriptive response. See, you nailed that.
Thank you.
You did a great thing. We also have some great fan questions today. We have a clip of Jamie Lee Curtis. There's a lot of good stuff coming up. I love the Burj Khalifa, the climbing the tall building, because I think for me, he always does his own stunts and he's really, really insane. But I think this is pinnacle insane and pinnacle impress. Like, they had to go through so many rounds of approvals. Well, it was a pinnacle insane until he jumped across a building and broke his foot and then kept running. But this was the moment where you really got like, oh, this guy would rather get the shot than potentially keep breathing. And I admire that level of commitment. I do. And it was just really beautiful. It was like, it's a gorgeous building. It was beautifully shot. That sequence to me is the one that always stands out. It's indelible. What about you?
I mean, my first choice would be what Spencer said, because that's De Palma. That just shows that's such a directorial thing, and what he brought to that movie. He's so good at, which is sort of silent suspense. De Palma does silent suspense really well. But I thought also from the last film, Rogue Nation, it's not as audacious a sequence as hanging onto a plane, but I thought the fight scene in the opera house where he's trying to prevent the assassination and there's people going up on things and going down on things and he's jumping over. It has one of my favorite Ethan Hunt moments in the later movies, which I love, is that he recognizes that he's getting old when he's trying to fight the guy and he keeps getting up, and there's a moment where it's just like, oh my God, and it's like he has to keep fighting. So I think that was a really well staged sequence, and one that I enjoy quite a bit.
Danielle.
Well, I was also going to say The Wire, just because there's a reason why that's iconic, and like that's the image that you get. No matter what, I'm not going to say that this series is like disposable or whatever, but no matter what you might think about any of the subsequent Mission Impossibles, that will forever be tied into that series. And there's a reason why it's so often parodied and it's so often done. But I like any sequence where a bunch of dudes keep taking off faces.
Yeah.
Any of the sequences where dudes take off their face and they're like another person. It's like, whoa, that dude's got 2 faces. Like, any of those is also my favorite.
Would you say it's a face off?
Off. Yeah.
I respect that too. I think I'm curious. I haven't seen this movie yet. Dan has. He's done a review for us. How does the action hold up? How does this latest big stunt hold up as compared to the ones we've been discussing?
Pretty well.
Pretty well?
Yeah, it holds up pretty well. I really love this new one. I think it's a great movie. So I think it holds up great.
Have you?
I haven't seen it yet, but I'm really excited for arm cocking.
Oh yeah. Well,
God,
okay.
that's so hot.
Does Henry Cavill at all kind of overshadow what Tom Cruise is doing? With the arm cocking?
Well, no, the arm cocking is you've seen it. It's not
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
he doesn't walk around the whole movie.
Does he just?
Okay,
Not like
but-
that's his thing.
okay,
is he
but
just
I
cocks
would
his
watch
arms
that
and-
much less excited for the film.
I love that. That's like the older brother move. Like, I'm just gonna do this, and if you're in front of me, I didn't hit you. You hit me.
Yeah.
You hit yourself.
People asked me in the review why I didn't mention Henry Cavill much, and there's a reason why, which is I think you should go find out.
Okay.
All right.
We'll go find out.
Man of mysteries.
Yeah.
There's certainly a lot of great action sequences in this franchise, and I remember just watching footage of Tom Cruise like just climbing a plane, and this wasn't even, I don't think, for a movie. I think
Just to feel alive.
Yeah,
yeah. I think it was just what he wanted to do after coffee that day.
Missed his flight. Not on my watch.
He is so. That for me is the
That
most.
Twilight Zone episode, except instead of the goblin, it's
Yeah.
Tom Cruise.
Like,
There's Tom Cruise is on the wings.
but it is one of the most fun things about this franchise. Like, it shouldn't matter, in a sense, while you're watching something. If it feels real, what does it matter? But the fact that he does it does make all the difference. Why is that, Dan?
Because you're so used to trickery that it's so impressive to see. It's like you're just like, wow, how did they make it look like Hugh Jackman is holding onto a helicopter? And even the best digital stuff, you can usually tell if it's a double or if it's a stunt double or if there's a CGI face replacement. There's tricks.
Yeah.
And there's just something to seeing the fact that like they strapped him to the side of an airplane and it took off and the camera just stays right there on him. And it's obvious that they're not, that's I think what's impressive is the idea that like this person who has no business doing these things and has many other people that could and probably should do these things
It would save them insurance money,
yeah.
certainly.
is just out there doing it.
Yeah, they are spending a lot on insurance.
Yeah.
Yeah, quite a bit. And most actors actually couldn't get away with doing this. They
Did
wouldn't.
you-
They just wouldn't let them.
I was reading though that like they took a hit because I think the budget for the movie they were saying went up like $70 million when he broke his foot because they had to shut down for 8 weeks and they
Yeah.
were saying that insurance has to cover a lot of that. That's
Yep.
why you take that insurance out. But
Right.
what is the rate going to be on the next one? Because now you've had a claim where a movie lost 8 weeks of production and they didn't miss their release date. It was
Yeah.
the combination of shutting down production for weeks and weeks but maintaining the release date that just caused a
Yikes.
massive overage as far as
Wow.
budget goes. So-
I wonder if they're going to keep letting him do it. I think largely it'll be how this film does. I think it's going to do very well. Like, I think it's going to do a tiny little bit of business. What do you think, Dan?
I think it's really good, but also if you look at I hope it breaks out, but Mission Impossible, while the movies have generally been well received, has a ceiling. It's
Yeah.
never been able to break out and do Fast and the
Avengers
Furious
money.
numbers or Avengers. It caps out around 200, 250 in the U.S. and around 700 worldwide.
It's nothing to sneeze at.
There's nothing
Yeah.
to sneeze
But
at, but
when
when
the
it's a
budget's-
$250 million movie.
Yeah, it makes, and then plus the marketing costs on
yeah.
top
Yeah.
of that. Yeah.
I hope
Oh,
it breaks out though.
Me too.
It's on track to do well. We'll just see how it does.
I hope it does, because frankly, I do want to see what he would do next. I mean, there is a huge curiosity factor for me. Are you a big fan of this franchise outside of the stunts?
Yeah, well, every time it comes out, I forget about it, and I'm like, oh, hello, old friend that I lost touch with in college. Like, it's just like I fall right back into it, and it's like a familiar, really entertaining, high-level popcorn movie for me.
Yeah.
But, like, I also don't remember, who the supporting cast is. Oh, Ving Rhames! Oh, cool!
Right.
Oh, he's a hacker? The hacker security guy?
Yeah.
Is that sort of how you feel?
Yeah, and again, it's not that I don't want to discount it because I know that this series has a lot of huge fans. It's just for me, it's when I turn and it's on cable, I will certainly be watching it.
Yeah.
But very rarely, like this one, I'm hearing really good things, and folks are like, "No, you really want to see this in theaters," so I'm gonna go. And usually, I've seen them like in theaters, but it's not. They're not must see, have to see. I'm a die if I don't see this the first weekend.
All right. Well, I'm going to die if I don't see it this weekend. Hopefully not, but I'm going to try to make it to the movies anyway. We have some great fan questions today. That one guy asks, when you interview celebrities, what kind of pressure do you feel to ask good, funny, interesting questions? How do you handle that? That's a great question. I have thoughts. Spencer?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I zero in on interesting questions because, like, you don't want to ask what everyone else has asked them before. It's boring to say, like, how did you get into character? You know, what's it like to be in a movie? Like, my brain, whatever they say after that is like white noise to me. So yeah, you just try to have fun and kind of stay on your toes. And if they say something interesting, just interesting, whether that's funny or that's deep, just give me something different.
Yeah, same. Because they'll be telling the same stories and the same anecdotes over and over and over again. Why does the only difference is whoever's sitting across from them. And 9 times out of 10, unless you're a huge Danielle Radford fan, you don't care who I'm interviewing. You care about the interview. So for me, it is very much about making sure that the questions are funny. But it's also about like being able to roll with the punches when they give a funny response. I feel like that's probably the thing that I do in interviewing that I might be like getting better at is when they have a good response, being able to like yes and play around with it a little bit more. So being able to do that helps. But yeah, of course there's pressure because you're sitting around. It's very much like you sit and wait, and then someone opens a door and is like, Radford, you're in, and then you have 4 minutes to get or less to get these dudes to like you enough to be able to trust that they can play with you and you're not going to humiliate them.
Yeah. Dan, what's been your experience?
I don't do it enough to have any chill whatsoever. I have no chill. I get so nervous. I feel an immense amount of pressure.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm stammer over myself a little bit when I'm doing it. But yeah, I
think you're great.
Thank you. My main thing is you can't ask things. It depends on the kind of interview. Like I talked to Ed Neumeyer, who wrote RoboCop and wrote Starship Trooper, and did less stuff with Verhoeven, and it was a more wide-ranging thing, and we could talk about whatever. So that's one thing when you have a longer format, but like particularly junket format, it's just my main thing is it's what can you ask them that's related to the movie but is not going to be the same thing that they're going to say to everyone else.
Yeah.
And then if I have a little more license, it's generally like, what can I ask that I think is going to bring an interesting response? Like, I don't want to ask this, like you said, the same thing because those are easy questions to come up with.
Yeah.
The same thing that everyone else is asking. Like, it's tougher to like dig down and say like, well, we talked to the American Animals cast and the director, and I think that I dug down and kind of was just like, hey, you seem to play characters that do this, or you seem to, and I think that a lot of times directors or actors kind of appreciate a little bit when an interviewer does background beyond the movie that they're talking to them about. It's just like, hey, I noticed a connection between this movie and this thing, and they'll kind of go like, oh wow, I hadn't thought about that. It's kind of getting them to like, there's a certain like sort of, and I get it. Like there's a certain kind of like thing that actors do when they're doing, especially this gauntlet of interviews, where they just know what they're going to say to certain questions and they just kind of go into a pre-programmed state of answering. Because they have to do 500 of them. It's not their fault. It's trying to like kind of snap them out of that and give them something that I think they appreciate answering a different kind of question. So,
but I think also sometimes, they can get freaked out by because sometimes, and you can tell, especially when it's an actor, that it's like, this could be a breakout role for them, or they just don't want to mess it up. And their primary thing is, I just don't want to say anything stupid. I don't want to mess it up. And so then they'll keep trying to reel it back and being like, blatantly, I'm only doing the 5 answers that I have rehearsed.
Yeah, sure. So, which that's, just roll with it.
You just roll with it.
I've done this since 2008, I think, or 2009. Print interviews, which is when you have more time. I've done lunch interviews, which is when you're working for a award site and then you have like a full lunch with the person because they're campaigning for their film. Those are the best. Though hard to then write later because it's so much material. Print interviews are a little bit longer and a little more intimate. Long form video interviews, which are my very, very favorite, because you can actually, if the person is an interesting filmmaker, particularly directors are my favorite to talk to, you can go deep. Those might not be the most popular interviews, but those are my favorite to do, because you can really talk about very real things. And if they're fun, that can still be fun and engaging. And then the junket interviews, which out of that, the best that you can hope to get is you can go in like a Terminator and go for this one package and this one news piece, and that's your mission, you know. Or you can go in and do stuff that we do here, which is like a bit and that's it, one, you know, because you don't have enough time. And the thing that's really challenging, I think, about interviews, aside from coming up with the questions in the first place, there's some people where it's like, if you gave me Ridley Scott, I don't need help coming up with those questions. All I need is more time, and an open Ridley Scott. But is that 50% of your job is not up to you. And that's always the hardest thing about an interview. They have to engage too. They have to come ready to either go deep and give you real answers and talk like a human being and not just give you sound bites, or they have to come ready to play. And a lot of times they're doing world tours, they're exhausted, they're jet lagged. And it's not even that they're being mean, they're just tired.
Yeah.
And it's hard for them to give it all. But when they're great, and we have an interview up right now with Henry Cavill where I think he was great, and he fully
really
played along with Hal and put on mustaches and had a sense of humor about himself. It's fabulous. I think that can be really fun and really, really engaging. And then I guess like the other thing is when people are talking outside at the junket locations, the other thing that can be a little tricky, I've had some friends that like said what their approach was going to be going in, and then other people lifted it from them. And like that can be a little bit tricky and disappointing. But in general, you do want to focus on just doing what is appropriate for that situation. And a lot of times you have to do a straight interview because that's what's been demanded of you.
Yeah.
And so then you have to find the best way to do that still keeps it fresh. Clark Wolf was at Comic-Con with us, and she asked a question that was very personal to her and to Jamie Lee Curtis about Halloween. Let's take a look.
And I'm a horror fan, legit horror fan. It's so amazing that you are back for this, and John's doing music and producing. Nick is back in the suit. What do you think Debra Hill would think of all of this? People don't ask about her enough, which is why.
No, they don't. I think Laurie Strode exists because of Debra Hill. You know, I don't think John Carpenter conceived Laurie Strode. I think Debra did. They were lovers, they were partners, they co-wrote the script. And I think her voice in those young women's voices established the very vulnerable center of the movie, which then collides with this very random, terrifying violence. And I think that's what made the movie so incredibly powerful. And she is unsung and long gone, and I miss her. And of course she would be she had incredible spirit, and so she would have loved all of this. She was a great, great, great woman, and I miss her. Thanks for asking about her.
I wish I could have met her.
Now she made me cry.
I'm sorry.
On their television.
I'm sorry. It's because of the fandom. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you for sharing with me. I really do appreciate it. And I'm such a fan of you. Thank you.
Oh.
Yeah, I love that moment. And it's interesting because we had legendary producer Gail Hurd at Comic-Con as well. Clark and I interviewed her. And she, if you guys don't know who Gail Hurd is, you do. She's an icon in this industry. She co-wrote The Terminator. She's producer on The Walking Dead, Punisher Warzone, all of the things. And she was talking about when the camera stopped rolling, we kept talking to her for a little while, and she was talking about Debra Hill and how Debra Hill had been a huge mentor to her, and that in her day it was sort of like there was room for one lady, and that Debra didn't have that attitude, and she had like to help and pull up and sort of be strong together. And she was, if you don't know who Debra Hill is, I really recommend that you look into it because she's another iconic producer. She co-wrote Halloween with John Carpenter. She was his producing partner for many, many years. She was a huge influence on the work that you love from John Carpenter. And they also had a personal relationship, and she had a career unto herself. But Clark had been at a Halloween screening, sort of an anniversary screening, and people were clapping for the composer, and they were clapping for sort of the production designer. And she said that nobody clapped for Debra Hill. And so she wrote a piece about her and her career for Nerdist, and I suggest you go read it, because I think that if you love film, a lot of times producers aren't necessarily, it's the actors first, then maybe the directors in certain cases. And if you're Kevin Feige, the producer, right, who's more than a producer. But these collaborative director-producer partnerships, like the one between Carpenter and Debra Hill, have more of a say on what you love and what you've seen on the final screen, especially when they're also writers, which he was, than you can possibly imagine when it's a healthy collaboration. So I think that was a great, unique question, and I got a beautiful response. So there's an example for you right there.
And I think that even when people like women like Debra Hill and Marcia Lucas and Gail and Hurd are recognized, they're referred to as, you know, the woman behind the man, the woman behind Cameron, the woman. It's like, no, they're the women with Cameron, the women with Carpenter, the women with Lucas. They were standing with them every step of the way on these things. I mean, Gail Ann Hurd is as responsible for getting the Terminator to the screen as James Cameron, in the sense of like, if you have a writer and director with no producer, you don't have a movie. You don't have it.
But she also co-wrote.
But co-wrote. Yeah. I mean, but in the sense of like, sense of producing, Debra Hill produced Halloween in addition to co-writing with Carpenter. Marcia Lucas didn't produce Star Wars, but she was the editor on it. And again, if you read into the history of that movie and how vital she was to the shaping of that film and that narrative, I think that it's. I mean,
we know what Star Wars looks like with and without her. So
exactly,
you be the judge.
And frankly, you know what Carpenter's work looks like with and without Debra Hill.
Yeah. So I think the idea of just like, you know, because there's a directed by credit and it has a great director's name, and I'm not saying that Cameron and Carpenter and Lucas aren't great directors, but they are collaborative, and to essentially ignore the collaborators, particularly when they're women, it happens so much. And then even the way that they're recognized, I think that, you know, in general, I think producers don't get the credit that they should, because I'm reading the Jaws log right now, and it's like Steven Spielberg gets so much credit. It's like, without Zanuck and Brown producing that movie, it doesn't get made. It doesn't get made. But it seems to particularly happen when there's a woman or female producing. They just kind of get, oh, you're the woman behind the man. Like, no.
Yeah.
They're not.
I'm such a huge fan and advocate of really creative producers and the impact that they can and do have on film. And I thought that was a great question. So thank you to that one guy, and thank you to Clark, and thank you to Jamie Lee Curtis for like being Jamie Lee Curtis.
Soul. Yeah.
That was pretty beautiful. Cody wants to know, what are some movies you only watched because someone else wanted you to and you ended up loving them? He says for him it's Ex Machina.
Grease 2.
Grease 2. Wow.
Yes. Was it me that told you to watch this?
It was. No, it was my. I believe. Best friend or one of my friends in high school was always like, Grease 2 is better than Grease 1. Grease 2 is better than Grease 1. And we could never find Grease 2, so she had a copy. And I watched it and I immediately fell in love. Yeah. And it became one of my favorite things. And that's one of those things where it's like, I have made like decades-long friendships based on the first time I met someone us talking about our love of Grease 2.
Yeah.
And it is cheesy and it is campy. It is a different feeling and a different vibe than the first Grease. You can call it a bad movie. I wouldn't take that away from you, but if it is a bad movie, it's the good kind of bad movie.
Would you say that you want a cool rider?
She does it on a ladder.
Cool rider.
Man, I'm so happy Michelle Pfeiffer's back.
Boy, no ordinary boy's gonna do.
Whoa.
Okay, I apologize.
Never.
at large.
Never.
Spencer, how about you?
I have a very similar choice, and I think I've talked about this on the show before. Is when my wife said, "Wait, you've never seen The Cutting Edge?"
Oh my God, The Cutting Edge is so good.
Magic.
That is so cheesy, but in such a fun '80s way of like, he's a hockey player, but she's an ice dancer. Like, they need to be the her
Are they
dad
gonna
makes him
kiss
the
her
couple.
face?
Yeah, the
She's
toe pick.
She's a figure skater. She's not
Figure
an
skater,
ice
excuse
dancer.
me. It's one of the ultimate cheesy '80s sports rom-coms I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It's just perfect. It hits all those beats so on the nose that you can make a drinking game to it.
Have you seen Love and Basketball?
I don't think I have.
Suggested follow-up.
Okay.
For real.
I'll check
Yeah.
that out.
I'm struggling to think of one. It's because I don't remember who tells me to see movies mostly. I will say, and I've said it many times before, I'm not a big horror guy. And my girlfriend Mara is. And so she has, I have watched a lot of horror movies with her that I've ended up liking quite a bit. The Sinister, I really, really enjoyed. Some of the Annabelle 2, which is a movie that I never would have actually seen. I actually ended up kind of enjoying that one. So every now and then, particularly around Halloween, she'll say like, "Here's a great horror movie. Here's a great horror movie. Here's one," and I'll watch it and I'll be like, "Hey, you know what? I really like that." And I wouldn't have watched it because I would avoid horror because I'm a wuss. But she's actually exposed me to several horror movies that I've come out saying like, "Oh, really? I like that," and it's given me a new appreciation for the genre. In general, we've
Trust
seen a
the
lot of
rocket
crappy
scientist.
movies too,
Yeah.
but we've
Just
seen some
gotta-
great ones.
Just gotta trust the rocket scientist.
Just
man.
always trust the scientist in the room.
Yeah.
That's the lesson.
Yeah. I don't have one.
Oh,
I really don't. I was struggling too to think like what is like a movie that I wouldn't have watched unless someone demanded it, and I just don't have a single one. There's things that people suggest, and I'm mostly just game for stuff. I'm like, okay, I'll check it out. Why not? I'm gonna struggle. I'm gonna keep trying to think of that. Zayas asked, who aside from Taika would you want to replace Gunn? I'd go with Black Mirror's Charlie Brooker, CW's 100 Jason Rothenberg, American Horror Stories Ryan Murphy, or Noah Hawley from Legion. If you put all of that together, that would be a very interesting movie.
Yeah.
If you got
Yeah.
them as a team.
Yeah, that
group of-
Voltron.
those are very, very, very different creators. What do you think?
Taika's obviously a great pick. Works in the Marvel Universe, works in that tone. I love Noah Hawley. If we can't get, James Gunn back or Games Gunn or whatever, him with a mustache, or Sean Gunn or whatever. So who would be like James Gunn before Guardians now, which is like a kind of a horror
It's interesting because I don't
indie guy.
think you ever, or I couldn't have predicted that the James Gunn. I mean, you can see similarities in retrospect, but I didn't know that he was going to be able to deliver a movie with quite that much heart.
Yeah, right.
So it's hard to make even a comparison because he changed and he evolved his style to match the work.
Yeah. I've got a pick.
I've got an off the wall one. Give me yours.
This guy's like probably a crazy person. Gaspar Noé.
Oh my God!
Who did the 3D porn movie and then like the first person DMT
I
death
hate
trip
that
movie.
I hate
Enter the Void?
No, not Enter the Void.
Oh.
The what was it called?
I don't
Love?
know. I never saw it.
Was it called Love?
Probably or
The
a
porn?
Climax or something
The
like
porn
that.
the porn
The
movie.
3D porno, but then
Yeah.
he also did this movie that the one I did see was a really trippy. It was like Hardcore Henry, but way before that,
Yeah.
of like a guy who smokes DMT and then dies and gets reincarnated,
Sure.
and it's just so trippy and out there that and like intense with some jokes in it. So yeah, sure, he's probably a sociopath, but so was James Gunn back then.
He sure is. I don't think that's doing much to reform the Disney image. So, but his other films I like, but that one I hate. I really truly violently detest it, and I can break down. I almost left the theater. I think I did, and I've never done that. I hate that movie, and I'm happy to break it down for you, Wyatt, at a later occasion. How about you?
This may sound like a cop-out, but I'm not really at the point right now where I'm started processing in my mind who replaces James
Yeah.
Gunn. I'm still just trying to sort through my own thoughts on the whole situation. So I'm I'm not holding anyone else to the standard, but I'm not at the point where I'm just like, oh, who's gonna take over for him? I'm still the whole situation is just so, I don't know, so many pieces to it that I'm just at the point where I'm still thinking about that. So sorry, it's a cop out answer, I guess, but I'm not at the point where I'm like, ooh, but who's going to take over for him? I'm more concerned with like, what does this mean
for the
on so many
future,
different levels?
So Danielle, who's your pick?
Yeah, sorry, I
honestly,
don't
no,
mean to
no,
put
no,
anyone
no
else in a
worries.
bad
Thank you.
position.
No
but-
worries. I was I literally just thought about this right now. It's weird. He would never do it. I think Donald Glover. He'd never do it.
Has he directed before?
Yeah, he directs Atlanta.
Oh, he does?
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
cool.
his thing. That's his entire baby.
Well,
and
I
if
thought
he,
it was that.
well, I mean,
the
along with other
creator.
directors and
Yeah.
stuff, but he's done directing.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, I just think that like it could be. I think that he could nail humor. It would be different, but it's going to be different in tone no matter who you get kind of on there. He's obviously worked in the sci-fi space. He knows from funny. He started in sketch comedy. He would never do it, but it would be interesting to see. Plus, he also has extreme love and appreciation for music, which is also something that is such a big heart of the Guardians, that you want it to be somebody who really loves music and has a connection with it.
So at my very, very first, I think it was my first or like early on in Comic-Con experience, I went to see this little independent film from a sketch comedy team called Mystery Team. And have you seen it? And Donald Glover. I'm like, that's kind of like the Guardians if they were not superpowered and in space.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
All right, I'm for it. I don't have an answer for you because I'm like, Dan, I'm processing my feelings on the entire matter. We'll do one more
I didn't know we
question.
were allowed to do that.
Yeah.
I didn't know we were allowed to
You know, we
process
can
our
pass.
feelings.
We're
Spencer,
taking
you're
the
always allowed to
liberty.
process
Yeah.
your feelings.
Yeah.
Give the fans what they want. These are their questions.
Well,
Well, but I'm not going to give them a disingenuous BS answer that is not really what I feel. I literally have not for 1 second given any shred of thought to who would replace James Gunn yet.
yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
There's so much to think about. Katie wants to know. Actually, sorry, Katie. We'll do this another day. I'm going to do this one because it says Ian asked yesterday, Thursday, which is actually today. Marks would have been Stanley Kubrick's 90th birthday. What is your personal favorite film of his? That's a hard question.
Boy, they're all so different.
Yeah.
They're
I
all
mean,
so different.
They're all so different.
That's a really hard question. Ugh.
I've
Let's
been
try to answer.
publicly on that Barry Lyndon train before, and I'm
Yeah.
staying on it.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer because I hope it gets more people to watch Barry Lyndon.
Yes.
Which is so impressively shot. I grew up watching, so I feel like it's the basic B answer to say The Shining. But I
one of the
really
best
do
movies ever
love
made.
that film. However, I grew up watching A Clockwork Orange.
That
You
explains
grew
a lot.
up watching A Clockwork Orange.
Yeah.
Yikes!
That explains so many
So
things.
much, right? Like you get this now a little bit, right? Like it was super young and inappropriate to be. We watched it, we read the book, and it was one of those movies that, for whatever reason, like we rewatched it a lot. Like my girlfriends and I, when we were in like 7th and 8th grade. I don't know what's wrong with me. Talk to my therapist. But I really, it's a very, very disturbing film. But it's also one of the better films that's ever been made. He was Malcolm McDowell. He was notoriously a little psychologically abusive with him during the making of that film. Right on theme. But I think it just has so many depths to it in terms of what it's saying about just youth culture. The desire for violence, the desire to control violence, the impossibility of that as an equation, the ramifications of all of it. Plus, it's just like sick visually. And you have to learn a language to read the book, a made up one.
I mean, push comes to shove, I'd probably say Doctor Strangelove. For me.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I love all of them in different ways, but if you're talking about like which is the one that I can rewatch at any time, in any mood, under any circumstances. I love 2001. Love it. One of the most brilliant pieces of film ever made. But
Yeah.
it's not a movie that I'm going to sit down and watch whenever. Like I just saw it in a theater.
Have a nice
it was
chuckle.
incredible. It was brilliant. But same with The Shining. My personal favorite, I think, might be Doctor Strangelove. I just think it is of its time and also not. It is one of those movies that is relevant still, maybe more. I think Peter Sellers it's one of those brilliant performances ever on a film. It doesn't get credit because he plays so many different characters that people subdivide it in their heads into different actors when it's just one guy. George C. Scott is incredible in that movie. Slim Pickens, like one of the best castings of all time. Maybe the best fit for an actor to a role is Slim Pickens in that movie. I love Doctor Strangelove, so yeah, I'm gonna say Doctor Strangelove.
AI. No.
Oh,
No, although I don't know.
Nice.
I always say when watching AI, there's a very clear part of the movie where the movie has ended. And if you watch it up to the part where it is very clear that is where the movie was supposed to end, it is a really good movie. I think I have to agree. I really like Dr. Strangelove. I think that was one that I saw when I was younger. And I think that was one that helped, along with, other things like Kids in the Hall, Monty Python, kind of shaped my sense of humor, weirdly enough.
Yeah.
It feels like a weird movie to talk about, like, that shaped my sense of humor. But I think that was one. Plus, I love The Shining. I'm also not a really big horror person. So as much as I love it and I love the visuals, it's also like, the visuals.
Yeah.
don't most people? I think I always forget. Didn't he direct Spartacus?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my
I think
God.
most people forget that
Yeah.
Spartacus is a Stanley Kubrick movie.
Great movie.
Yeah.
It's good. Yeah.
I mean, there's no
it's
bad
different.
answer
It's a studio.
here.
It's the
It's
closest
just-
to
yeah.
a studio picture that he ever did. But I always forget that Stanley Kubrick directed Spartacus.
Yeah, it's. I think one of the things that's so impressive about his career, and Scorsese is like that. What was what
I
did
heard a
JT
JT
say?
huge
I heard a
JTE yawn.
JTE yawn, so that's always tells us that we're running too long.
All right.
Sorry.
Well, then we'll just break. Fine, JT.
No, sorry.
been
I
good
tried to not
talking to you
react,
guys
but
today.
anytime you just hear,
I hope you had a good Friday. We'll go bore someone else. You should watch The Most Distracting Movie Mistakes this weekend, produced by our own Billy Business. It's hilarious. Go watch Henry Cavill put on a mustache. It's also hilarious. It's Hal Rudnick at his Hal Rudnick. Would you say at the height of his powers?
Yeah.
Yes, so would I.
the height
Do
of his
it.
powers.
Do it.
Have a good weekend.
Do it.
Bye.
Bye.